Together, we will make America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Okay, you're going to have to tell me now, 5 by 5 now. Okay. Rumble Studio had the incorrect microphone input, which is why you could hear me. My mic was muted, but just not the mic that it was actually using. And the mic it was using was not pulling the sound from the computer. Okay. Silly me. I had to refresh Rumble Studio right before we went live. And that basically made it so that everything was effed up. All right. Well, listen, guys, glad you're back. Yeah, there's going to be an echo on YouTube for the time being. Once we get into the regular show, everything should be fine. Do me a favor, guys, if you haven't yet, hit that like button. Help us out by sharing the show. The noose is tightening around Anthony Fauci. Yeah, Fauci's Munster. That's exactly what it is. Vincent Munster, another lackey of Anthony Fauci, finds himself under FBI criminal investigation. That is now 2 top Fauci lieutenants. And every step closer you get to Anthony Fauci, you have to ask these people whether or not they are willing to go to prison for the rest of their lives to save him. So do me a favor, sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. We're going to be right back after this. So the way people think about retirement is changing. For years, it was pretty simple. You just bought stocks, bonds, and you hope that the market did its job over time. But with everything that's happening in the economy today, rising inflation, global uncertainty, some investors are starting to realize that they might need a more diversified approach. And that's where assets like crypto and precious metals are really starting to come into the conversation. Not as speculation, but as a way to make a thoughtful allocation as part of a long-term strategy. So with a crypto IRA with My Digital Money, you can now invest in both crypto and precious metals using a structured retirement account. Your assets are going to be kept in cold storage, so they're offline and protected from any online threats. And they're also held with a regulated U.S. custodian and supported by a U.S.-based team, people you can actually talk to. So if you want to know how it works, find out by going to mydigitalmoney.com, or you can just click the link below, or you can even give them a call, and they will speak English. 833-636-2008. And if you want to ask about their promotion on how you can get up to $200 based on your investment, just enter RedPill78 in the promo code field when you see it on the website to be eligible. And when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being here. Let's see. James, you know, just because there hasn't been an arrest yet doesn't mean there isn't going to be an arrest. I actually do know that James Comey was just arrested the other day, and the way that the Justice Department works is that people have to be investigated first, then they have to be indicted by a grand jury, then they have to be arrested and arraigned, then they have to be put on trial, and then people can actually be put in prison. If you don't like the American system of justice, then everybody has the opportunity to try to create something on their own. You can always attempt to get involved in local politics. You could become a magistrate judge yourself without even going to law school. And you could run for sheriff in your hometown. You could even move to a different country. All right. Now, I'm going to put it out there at the beginning of the show. There may be an echo at times on YouTube. I have to remember to mute my microphone when I'm playing videos. I would actually like to try something. Check a setting on my soundboard and see if I can alleviate that echo when I'm playing audio. I'm going to make sure everybody hears it. And if they hear it and don't hear the echo, then I did something correct. Yes, the wheels of justice turn slowly, and I know that's frustrating. But as I have tried to remind people on so many different occasions, we are not fighting a battle that began 8 years ago. This is an enemy that's been in control of the United States of America and all of the institutions of government since long before any of us here were ever alive, since before we were a glimmer in the eyes of our grandparents even. This was a nation that was captured, and President Trump and this administration, in my estimation, is doing the best job that they can. Now, if you would do it differently, well, you are free to say that. Obviously, this is the United States of America, but I will never accept that nothing is happening or that nothing will ever happen, because I have been paying attention to corruption, to intelligence, to the machinations of this global criminal cabal, this apparatus that President Trump and his administration are currently taking down right now. And I have seen the changes that this country has undergone, both positive and negative. And we are 100% on a positive slide right now. So let us begin with an update to the story that we talked about yesterday in Ohio, the Medicaid fraud. Now, one of our viewers, Karen, and I'm not going to identify her any more than that. Karen actually is one of the people who this program was actually intended for, because her father is elderly. He qualifies for, I believe, 6 hours of this sort of in-home healthcare assistance per week. And so, you know, Karen is obviously helping out her dad. She's taking him to the grocery store, taking him to doctor's appointments and stuff. It's not a crazy amount of money, but I mean, it does help her, obviously, and it helps her get some of the things that she needs to help take care of her dad. And there actually is an app that she had to download. She has to be in the location, which is her father's home, when she signs in and out of the app to verify that she actually was there and doing the work that, you know, Medicaid is going to reimburse for. So this is a perfect example of a way in which this type of a program is meant to operate. There is records. There are checks and balances. There is an infrastructure that already exists to make sure that the elderly people who are getting the assistance are actually going to be receiving the assistance. In order for someone like Karen to just be shysting the system for 6 hours a week to get the money from Medicaid, then obviously her father would have to be involved in it, because there's also other regular visits and communications that go on with that home health care company. Now, of course, in Karen's instance, she is a patriotic American citizen. Her father is as well. Her father is a veteran. So they're not going to try to stiff the United States of America. And they greatly appreciate the assistance that she and her father are able to receive. However, you look at a Somalian family, people who have no connection to this country, who knew that they could come here to set up as many scams as possible and siphon off millions upon millions of dollars. And they have no problem scamming the United States taxpayer. They have no problem scamming the Medicare and the Medicaid system. And so somebody like an Omar Fayed or a Muhammad Abraham, any disambiguation of the same name over and over again, of course, their parents or their grandparents are going to lie. They're going to lie. They don't care. They're just here to get as much money as possible and to do as little work as they possibly can. They get off on the idea that they are taking money out of our pockets and they're weakening the United States of America. So I sincerely hope that the real home health care companies that are actually providing a service to people like Karen's veteran father, they're going to be able to remain in business because we've already seen in the state of Minnesota, there were a number of real autism centers, real home health care companies who simply had their money cut off because the state government of Minnesota refused to cooperate with the government of President Trump, working with CMS. So hopefully everything gets sorted out, and these reports that Luke Rosiak continues to do are going to be able to expose those individuals that are ripping off the people of the United States of America. Now, I wouldn't say that Medicaid is a scam. I would say that people abuse the Medicaid system, and there is a lack of checks and balances up until the situation we find ourselves in now. It was possible to scam the Medicaid program, but I don't think that Medicaid was created with the sole intention of it being a scam. It's just that the situation is abused. You take a look at processes and systems and structures, and it's the people who are corrupt. It's the processes that are input by the corrupt people that end up corrupting the system. And so it is possible, I think, to fix these things. It is entirely possible to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. You have a series of checks and balances with accurate record keeping and accurate attention to detail, making sure that people are reporting in the way that they're meant to, and that they're not simply allowed to, just be to their own devices. And we can ensure that something like this doesn't happen in the future. Now, this is going to begin here with part 2 of Luke Rosiak's series, Inside Ohio's Home Health Empire. 7 buildings, 288 Medicaid companies, and $250 million. I need to say thank you to Shadow Ops RC. Thank you, no sound. Mokanon says sound is coming from the computer mic so we can hear you and not the video. Thank you for that. Lee Walden says, hat tip Mr. Secretary Rubio, master at the podium. We are going to look at a clip from Rubio. Thank you to Sean Joe. Thank you for the shades. Thank you to Sean Joe for the can. And thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. And just want to make sure, yes, we are live over there on YouTube. Okay, great. Now, pardon me. Jumping over here to Luke Rosiak's, oh my God, create a free account to read and comment on articles. Are you kidding me? I don't want to give the Daily Wire my information. Son of a gun. Okay, let me see if I can find an archived version of this article. Just a sec. I'm not trying to give Daily Wire any information about me. You guys know that the Daily Wire is like on the verge of going out of business, like almost insolvent. They had to fire like 60% of their staff. Shucks. Okay, I am going to have to create an account, you guys. Hold on just a second. Okay, we will use my business email. Okay. I have to create a complicated ass password. Oh, geez. Okay. Let us add. Okay, copy the password. Okay, save. Zak Paine. Okay. So now they've got my marketing information. Great. Okay, back to this. All right, so part 2 of the series we began yesterday. In Columbus, Ohio, the front doors are open, but inside, the 7 massive complexes appear to be largely abandoned. Smoke detectors chirp for new batteries. No one is there to change them. Some office doors have signs suggesting the owner is out to lunch, but the piles of mail outside tell a different story. Stray cats have taken up residence in the parking lots. You guys ever been on the phone with a business and you have an extended conversation with them, and in the background you hear the smoke alarm chirping over and over and over again? This one time I was on a call with this guy and I had to like make an appointment. He was like coming to pick up a car because this was actually back when my car was destroyed in Las Vegas about a year ago. And I'm on the phone with a dude for like 25 minutes arranging this stuff. And so I must have heard that stupid smoke alarm beep like 25, 30 times in the background. And at the end of the call, and I was like, hey, are you working from an office or are you working at home? And he was like, no, I work remote. And I was like, what's your address? I'm going to send you a 9-volt battery. He didn't think it was that funny. I thought it was great. I mean, like, let me just clue you in on something, buddy. Those things chirp for a reason. You're not just supposed to completely ignore it. I couldn't believe it. Anyways, the government is under the impression that all of these office buildings hold thriving healthcare businesses. The 7 buildings along East Dublin Granville Road in Columbus, Ohio, are filled with hundreds of office suites, all owned by a company named Cordoba Real Estate. It's a large majority of the tenants in that building bill Medicaid, the taxpayer-funded medical program for the impoverished, as a home health care business that provides low-skilled, usually non-medical care to elderly or disabled people. Daily Wire has spent weeks analyzing Medicaid data released by the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency in an effort to weed out wasteful government spending. The buildings owned by Cordoba stuck out because each housing dozens of businesses, all that bill Medicaid. In all, the Cordoba-owned buildings in Columbus house 288 businesses registered with Medicaid. The Daily Wire found that together, they charged the taxpayers more than $250 million between 2018 and 2024. That's in a city where only 6,273 people 75 or older are on Medicaid. The Medicaid program has exploded in Ohio thanks to a waiver that expanded the medical program to include wide-ranging at-home services, such as homemaking, allowing taxpayer money to be spent for tasks such as making the bed or working on a hairdo. Ohio has 3,700 companies with home health in their name, according to a review of Ohio business records. Now, let me be clear here. I believe that the expansion of a program like this certainly was done with the intention of creating fraud. The idea of home health aides, I think it's necessary. You have people who are elderly, infirmed, perhaps disabled. They're simply unable to do things fully on their own. They can't afford to live in a nursing home. They don't have any family who can come there and stay with them full time. Perhaps they simply want to maintain some level of independence. And to have someone who can assist them with certain necessary tasks, I totally agree with that. But to have somebody who just comes and hangs out with them and watches TV or helps them brush their hair, I don't think that that is something that the American taxpayer should be paying at all. But, you have an elderly person, maybe they're unable to drive anymore. They certainly can't afford to take a cab or take an Uber, and there may not be people around who can pick them up and drive them to the grocery store. If you have someone, a home health care aide that can assist them with something like this, I have no problem with that. But the vast expansion of these programs certainly was done with the intention of pumping as much money in as possible, because the politicians, those who are corrupt, making these rules inside pieces of legislation, they were fully aware that these programs would be abused and that money would be siphoned out. And, that's why we have politicians who own these home health care businesses and who got fantastically wealthy off of it, also knowing that they never wrote into the legislation any sort of checks or balances. And the people working at Medicaid, they're not being paid to do their due diligence and check on these companies and make sure that they're even real. So Ohio has 3,700 companies listed in the home health sector. They actually have home health in their name, and that is according to a review of Ohio's public business records. In particular, it's blown up in Columbus, which is the home to the second largest Somali population in the United States. And that right there is your number one clue. The program has little oversight, with most of the so-called care happening inside individual homes, making it susceptible to fraud and abuse. There's no evidence to indicate that Cordoba has any role in the Medicaid companies housed in their buildings. It actually sold 2 of the 7 buildings this January. Yet the home health businesses have been established as if by a machine, with some sharing nearly identical signs that suggest coordination rather than rivalry. One sign for National Home Healthcare Services, LLC, explained that the home Medicaid business often don't provide health care at all. They provide services like companion and conversation and light housekeeping. Next to it hung a sign proclaiming, "We are on a break right now." Another sign for Guidance Home Healthcare, LLC, was graphically identical, even with the same slogan. "Your peace of mind in home healthcare, only the number was different." And look, you can see that right here. It's like they just found a free template on Canva or something like that. And the person who made Guidance Home Healthcare said, "Here, let me give you this template. You just throw a healthcare named business on it, and then you're going to get rich, just like me." At one of these Cordoba buildings, he says, "I finally located a rare home health business with someone in it, GC Home Healthcare LLC." And he asked how he recruits employees. Abid, the owner's son, said employees and patients come as a package. In 70% of cases, the employees are being paid to spend time with their own family members, he explained. Usually the patient, they have someone in the family that has the qualifications to be an aide, CPR, and everything, so they just come to us. After getting a note from a doctor vouching for the elder's need for personal services. The family member of an elderly person isn't set up to bill Medicaid, so a company stands in the middle. We're taking a small cut because Medicaid pays us and we pay them their hours. He said the number of hours depends on the doctor's recommendation, but it's often an hour a day. You expect them to take time off of work to take care of their relatives. There has to be some sort of benefit. When he was asked why he wouldn't simply help their aging parents without billing Medicaid, he said, "Well, if the government is going to pay you to do it, it's an incentive. I think most people nowadays, they don't really care as much." Each animated graphic shows a Cordoba property, along with the owners or managers of every company located inside that is billing Medicaid, as well as some of the names of the other businesses in the buildings that receive money from the state of Ohio. Medicaid is a joint federal-state program, so some of the state total may be included in the Medicaid figure, and the data comes from the federal, Medicaid, and Ohio spending records. And you can see that in the graphic right here. That means, man, there's a lot of businesses all owned by foreigners. There's not a single American or Eurocentric sounding name among the lot of them. 52 companies, $70.1 million in Medicaid, $42.4 million paid from the state of Ohio. So inside this Cordoba property at 5900 Roche Drive, many of the businesses have signs saying the employees are on break. But there are indications that might be a ruse. It's pretty clear that no one has been entering JLL Home Healthcare LLC, where the door doesn't even have a doorknob. It's adorned with a "Sorry, we're closed" sign and features the bizarre slogan, "Steaming to assist." What the hell does that mean? Steaming to assist. It was incorporated by Kofi Adoma, who also owns a trucking business called JLL Transportation and Logistics. Down the hall at First Choice Home Healthcare LLC, when we visited, there was an envelope sitting at the door postmarked from 5 months prior. That was from the Ohio Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Vetting such a business would be almost impossible. In medical records, its CEO is a person named Ahmed with no middle name. Another company, Medina Home Healthcare, led by Nirmala Adhikari, received $410,000 from the state of Ohio and $22 million from Medicaid. Its billings topped out at nearly $1 million in 1 month in December of 2023. Its website is a dead link. They haven't posted to their Facebook page since September of 24. Its last post says the author was transitioning to helping people write essays to get into college in the United States. His LinkedIn says he lives in India, but majored in feminism and social justice at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Oh my God. With so many companies, all virtually indistinguishable from one another, lacking websites or advertising and charging the same Medicaid rates, the question arises, how do they recruit patients? Billing patterns show rapid and unusual growth. ZNC Healthcare, who's owned by Isaac Amoka for $11 million in billings, had 93 claims in September of 2018. Then suddenly, 1,065 in the next month, according to data. An audit found that 56% of ZNC's Medicaid payments didn't match up with its staff's electronic records, which means the auditor did not recommend any repayments after ZNC said its employees are confused. Our employees are retarded. Moonlight Home Healthcare, run by Sassy Kaza, which took in $9 million. Moonlight's offices were not just closed when the Daily Wire visited, but there was nothing inside. They billed around $20,000 a month until skyrocketing to more than $500,000 a month in December of 2023. Like a shocking number of home health care firms, it appears to have failed to pay its own taxes. They took in millions from taxpayer money, but refused to return to Uncle Sam even a share of their corporate profits. Tax records show that the Moonlight has 7 state tax liens against it, totaling $70,000 from 2022 through December of 2025. That is despite the fact that Kaza was, in fact, moonlighting. He was simultaneously running Comprehensive Behavioral Health Associates in Youngstown, Ohio, which billed $32 million for community psychiatric supportive treatment. And the latter company had its own $600,000 federal tax lien against it, and a website that contains only stock art and doesn't contain the name of a single doctor or employee or their qualifications. With those companies seemingly in trouble, Kaza has leaned into the industry. In January 2025, he established Lifeline Home Support, registered to the same exact Roche Drive address as Moonlight. Now, let me just ask you a question. Has anybody here ever had the IRS or even the state government of your state come after them? Honey, I got to take down one of these. There's 3 of them, and I can't see the chat. Okay. Okay. We can keep one up there, but unable to pin message. Hold on. Let me refresh. Okay. Now it's gone, I guess. All right. So if you've ever had to enjoy the opportunity to be pursued by the IRS or by your state tax authority, I think you'll find that as an American citizen, they don't go easy on you. They don't stop coming for you until they get what they want from you. And that even includes trying to get blood from a stone. They will take your last dollar. They will auction your property. They will take your home. They will seek out every dollar that you might be hiding in any account anywhere in the world. But every time I look into cases like these, it seems like you have all of these foreigners, these people who have emigrated to the United States. Maybe they came as refugees. Maybe they came as asylum seekers. Maybe they just skipped across the border during the Biden years. But they don't pay their taxes, and nobody seems to do anything about it. I mean, yeah, it's very frustrating. But obviously, this is being addressed right now. But I think it's fair to express our frustration for the lack of opportunity for action to have been taken all of these years. So with these companies in trouble, he doubled down. At 2700 East Dublin, there are 80 companies that collectively billed at least $73 million to Medicaid and received $23 million from the state of Ohio, and 11 billed more than $1 million. Look at all of these businesses. Once again, they are all apparently owned by Muslim immigrants. You have an Alexis George. That is the most English-sounding name. I'd like to look into Alexis and see if that's even a real person, or perhaps that's the only one that owns a real company. So 2 claim Suite A alone at this particular address. You have both Continental Home Healthcare. That's led by Decca Mohammed, which, according to government records, they billed $15 million. And then you also have Dynamic Home Healthcare. That's owned by Saeed Ahmed, who is the government recipient of $10 million. And then you have Bernard Conadu's Buckeye Health Agency. They charged another $15 million. There was an audit that found they billed the government for visiting people at home when it was highly unlikely, because these people were also simultaneously in the hospital. So undoubtedly, Medicaid was making payments for their hospital time. There's no possible way they could have been visited at home at the exact same time. Now, Down the hall, you have another business called Omega Home Health Care Services. They charge taxpayers $11 million between December of 2017 and October of 2024. This is the only time that we actually have information for. And right here, you have a picture of a flyer that was posted by that same company saying they provide services like hair care and homemaking, which entails cleaning and bed making. Omega was incorporated back in 2011 by Mohammed A. Jama. Jama is one of those corrupt Democrat politicians that I mentioned earlier. Jama also founded a newspaper. That newspaper is called the Somali Post. He also formed a Somali coffee house. He's also been affiliated with the Somali Education Resource Center, which is also the recipient of $6 million in federal money alone in 2023, and that is all on top of raising 9 children and working as an engineer. So obviously, this guy is running all of these straw businesses, owning them, pulling in all of the money. He's got 9 kids, okay? The guy does not understand the pullout game, and so he's got to find some way to bring up all of those little Somali grub eaters to make sure that they can survive. Jama came here to the United States as a refugee seeking a better life. Now, just 25 years later, he's part of the true American dream where freedom, opportunity, and hard work can give any American a chance to achieve. That's from his campaign website. Jama, however, lost to a Republican. In April, he boasted on social media that he met with Mahad Salad, who is the head of Somalia's intelligence agency. You have to ask yourself, I mean, is this guy even really qualified as an engineer? Did he get some sort of DEI degree? Is his degree from an accredited engineering school? Did he go back to Somalia and receive an honorary degree? Does he understand what engineering is, or can he actually practice it in reality? Where does he work as an engineer? Is he working for the government of Somalia as a remote engineer? Who knows? Anyways, he previously ran in primaries for the Democrats for the Ohio House of Representatives in 2020 and 2022. His campaigns were boosted by, guess what, the home healthcare industry. There were at least 44 donations coming from home healthcare companies or their owners. And unlike most of these political campaigns you see, he ended up spending less than he raised. And he ended his latest campaign with an additional $31,000 left in that campaign account. Now, Jama started this first Medicaid business when he was in college. He actually spoke to the Daily Wire. Anyone can have a business and have another job so long as he has a good team. He said he sold the business years ago. Incorporation paperwork suggests that sale was actually only in October of 2019. But Omega was making up to $90,000 a month before the sale, according to federal Medicaid data. In August of 2025, Omega underwent a routine audit of a sample of their records by Franklin County's independent auditor, and they found, wouldn't you guess, some impossible claims. Now, in some cases, on the same day that Omega said it went to people's houses to take care of them, hospitals also billed Medicaid because, in reality, the patients were in the hospital. Now, Omega declined to submit any official response, according to the auditor. Instead of concrete repercussions, I think they probably should have been shut down. The auditor simply recommended that Omega refund $1,000 to cover the cases they identified where Medicaid's own data proved it impossible for these people to have given home visits. But what about the millions of dollars in other claims, you might ask? Well, the program simply took Omega's word for it. Wow, can you imagine that? Bilking the government out of millions upon millions of dollars, and they catch you in the act, and then rather than doing the hard work to actually perform a real audit and determine just how much money was actually stolen, you just say, "Trust me, bro," and they let you do it. Again, this would not happen if you were an American. So on Facebook, Jama said he works as an engineer at Whirlpool and that he was fired from a previous job where he was underpaid because of his skin color. Bullshit. I'm not buying it. If he was fired for his skin color, he would have had a discrimination case, and believe me, he would have filed it. But he did complain, apparently, though, he did not complain about the financial impact because what they do not know is that he built this side business with close to 100 people on his team. At 1425 East Dublin, One Community Mental Health LLC, run by Roberta Archiampong. They billed 70,000 claims total for $8 million, according to data. But they roamed through the building looking for this particular location, and there actually was no physical presence for a One Community Mental Health LLC. Now, the home health industry is not Roberta's first business that was tied to taxpayer funds. Back in 2019, Archiampong created Royals African International Food Market Incorporated. But there was soon a lien that was placed against that business by the Economic and Community Development Institute. They give federally funded loans for social and economic change. That is also a program that should not exist. Social and economic change, free money from the government? Absolutely not. She incorporated Nashek Interpreting Services LLC, which in 3 months later was forced to change its name to Royals Cleaning Services LLC. She went from interpreting to cleaning houses. In September of 2020, the cleaning service then changed their name to One Community Mental Health LLC. Now, this time, Roberta found great success. She struck gold. In that first month of billing Medicaid, they had taken in $96,000 worth of instant clients without even building a website. By January of 2023, they were charging taxpayers, get this, $654,000 a month for, quote, therapeutic behavioral services, psychosocial rehabilitation services, and community psychiatric supportive treatment. This is according to their own billing records they have submitted. Now, with all of that government money funneling in, Archiampong, whose business was, of course, cleaning houses just a few months earlier, well, now she has a lot of cash that she can do something with. She bought a $1.1 million home in a gated community in Powell, Ohio. And the reporter, Luke Rosiak, visited this home to speak with Roberta, but it was empty, and she actually had it listed for sale. Now, in February of 2021, she also created a nonprofit, wouldn't you know, First Access Community Resources. Now, what was that company, that nonprofit for? Well, they were providing community-based case management services. The filing paperwork was also sent to her food market. So the nonprofit was quickly abandoned. It went nowhere. In December of 2022, Archiampong incorporated Little Stars of America Learning Center, LLC. Good God. This is incredible. To take a look at just the flow of these businesses, there are some very obvious sources for fraud. And if I can't wait to see what the fraud task force discovers in Ohio, because they could simply go to one of these buildings and probably take down dozens upon dozens of corrupt businesses. If they go to all of them, please, God, I beg of you, Jesus, will you please look out for us on this? Get these people and arrest them. Put them on trial. The thing about Little Stars of America Learning Center, LLC, their address is also at the same address as the nonprofit, which is the African Food Market. So not long after that, she had another for-profit company that she started, One Community Development Support Services, LLC. That was listed under the category of residential treatment facilities, a drug treatment facility. This is exactly what we saw in Minnesota. And spending data for that one isn't exactly clear. Merciful Healthcare Services was another company registered to Mohammed Ahmed at 1395 East Dublin. Now, Mohammed and his company was paid $9.7 million by Medicaid. They received about $75,000 a month for most of the year of 2023. That rose precipitously to $500,000 a month in January of 2024. There was, of course, an audit here as well, like at many of these other companies, and they found a number of cases where they were billing for home visits that simply could not have happened because the patient was actually in the hospital at the exact same time. So the door at this business was knocked on, and he was asked a very simple question. Ahmed was asked a very simple question. What goes into a home healthcare business? This man who answered said, "I'm not an employee, and I don't know anything about what you're talking about." You're not an employee, but you're in the office? "I'm an employee, but I don't know anything about it." "Well, what did you do for the $10 million? "I don't know." And then he slammed the door. Now, legitimate businesses, I've seen this. I've been a business owner, been a sole proprietor of my own businesses since 2012, self-employed. Legitimate businesses typically take some time to ramp up, right? You generally don't make much money at first unless you buy a business that's already successful. But if you're starting out in something new, you've got to build a customer base. You've got to get a reputation. You have to have a presence in a market. You simply don't just walk in one day, throw your hat on the table, and start making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. I mean, that's just not the way it works. Unless, of course, you're a Somalian and you come to the United States of America and you're given a template for how to defraud the government. Now, if you look at the market such as this, I mean, where all of these businesses are the exact same, you've got dozens upon dozens of them, all located in the same building. I mean, that's what you would generally call oversaturation. You would tend to think, well, gosh, with these many businesses with a similar or literally exact type of market that you are seeking to get into, it would be difficult to make the kind of money that these companies are doing. But for some reason, in the city of Columbus, you got home healthcare companies out the ass that are making thousands upon thousands of dollars a day, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And there is no shortage of clients that they continue to bring in. And I would probably guess that every single Somalian who lives in Columbus probably has Medicaid, and they're probably using that number, and multiple people are billing on that number. At 2999 East Dublin, you have another business, Atlas Home Health, that's owned by Mayamuna Ahmed, took in $6.5 million. They first showed up in August of 2019, and the first month they showed up, they were bringing in $57,000 in their first month. Firms often exhibited drastic swings in revenue. As an example, you have Horizon Healthcare Services. That's owned by Joanna Kainu. $5.8 million they've billed. They billed $155,000 in October of 2022, $75,000 a month for most of 2023, and $180,000 a month for most of 2024. When Luke Rosiak showed up on the scene at Horizon turned out to be based out of what appeared to be a closet, a door with no window inside another room. It was dark and no one answered when they knocked. There are indications that seemingly separate companies may actually be connected. We've seen this many times before. At 1495 Morse, the Daily Wire knocked on the door of one company, North Star Home Healthcare LLC. They received $265,000, and they said that they were doing a story on the home healthcare industry. Now, the woman went through a rear passageway that connected it to another office, which was a trucking company. That was the business that she actually redirected any questions. Now, the man from Ultra Logistics LLC, the trucking company, was immediately irate. And he said, "The owner is not here right now. Why are you guys looking special for only Somalians? Why do you knock only on Somalian doors?" And he told the reporters that we're knocking on all the doors with taxpayer payments and home health care. He sneered, "Journalist? Who cares, journalist? You guys don't pay our bills. Blah, 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 blah. We don't need you guys. We know people to talk to. I'm going to tell everybody you guys are racist people." At 1415 East Dublin, Ohio, state taxpayers have sent $10 million to F&R Healthcare Services LLC at Suite 211 and $7 million to B&F Healthcare Services LLC in Suite 212, according to the data released by the government. Now, neither company shows up in the Medicaid or Ohio corporation records, which would seem to indicate that they're not real businesses. Never exceeding 17 patients, according to data released by the federal government, New Life Home Healthcare LLC made $1.5 million between August of 2020 and November of 2024. Now, that one is owned by Godwin Kwasi Owusu. That is a licensed practical nurse who actually filed for bankruptcy back in 2012, saying that he owned no property and had only $400 to his name. Well, things changed the next year because all he had to do was incorporate an LLC in Ohio. In May of 2024, that company had 16 patients and received $84,000 from Medicaid in that month, according to the federal Medicaid database. Now, the Daily Wire asked the Ohio Department of Medicaid if the data was accurate, and they do not dispute it. Look at this. Here's a private jet, a private plane, and a Camaro, it looks like. I bet you they're owned by the owners of one of these businesses. Of the 5 buildings in Columbus with the most number of Medicaid companies, 3 of them are owned by Cordoba, which is managed by a New Jersey man, Israel Steinberg and Isaac Nassar, according to business records. Nassar told the Daily Wire he doesn't have visibility into what the businesses are doing inside his buildings. I'm just a landlord, Nassar said, who lives in a multi-million-dollar house and also owns multiple airplanes. I don't have the slightest clue what tenants are building out. It's really not my purview. Steinberg did not return a request for comment. There's obviously been a lot of controversy surrounding the company's other properties in Ohio. Back in 2008, this same duo were part of the ownership group for an apartment complex in Columbus. They suffered an electrical fire that killed 5 people. Back in 2014, a 4-year-old was killed after falling into an open oven that the tenant had resorted to using to heat that home. And police said it was only the only available source of heat, meaning that these slumlords were not keeping up the conditions of their property, leading to the death of this 4-year-old. Now, the entire apartment complex was labeled a slum and a very bad place to live. Steinberg and Nassar were credited by the apartment complex for working to fix the troubled property they inherited. It's not my fault. I didn't do nothing. In 2009, Steinberg was also working for a company at the center of a mortgage and real estate scam that culminated in a suspect committing suicide in a cemetery. At the center of that was a developer called Stillwater, which received loans from a firm called IL Kesef to fix run-down houses. The fix-up money disappeared, and the houses remained boarded up and broken down, according to the Columbia Dispatch. Kesef's Larry Kushner was arrested for unrelated real estate fraud charges in New Jersey at the same time these problems became apparent in Columbus. Stillwater then hired Kushner's colleague, Steinberg, to clean up the mess, and Steinberg was paid more than $300,000 in fees from Parkview in 2004 and received a $4.5 million loan from Stillwater in 2005, but he was never implicated in the actual crimes. Steinberg was not implicated in any of that wrongdoing, and now Steinberg is the unlikely figure at the center, tying together hundreds of company billing Medicaid. My goodness, I can't believe it took us 45 minutes to go through that story. But here we are, 45 minutes in. Please tell me that we will bring divine justice and crush this invasion of the dark forces. No moral people would do what they are doing. No, they are amoral, certainly. They do not see themselves as human beings in the same way that we do. We are not human to them. And yes, I believe that the only way that this can be remedied is for that justice to be passed along. If it doesn't happen, then I think the administration is aware that people will lose all hope. There will be no reason to take the government of the United States seriously if they don't go after these people, take everything from them, everything they've stolen, get every single bank account, every crypto wallet, every house, every plane, every car. They must take these people to the cleaners, and then they can imprison them for a period of time, or they can simply send them back to their home countries. Lee said, I was being nice in that last post. I want to kick their freaking ass, no prisoners. These people got to be taken to the wood chipper. I agree with you. It's Tony Man. Good to see you, Tony. He says, hello, Zach and Lisa. I just stopped by to support the channel and update my progress, which is better than I expected. Modern surgery has come a long way. Feeling so much better. Tony, it's probably also your attitude about it. I think that there have been studies that have shown that People who have a sunnier disposition are more likely to heal. Also, you're doing the right stuff with the physical therapy, keeping yourself in shape. I bet you eat well, and I bet you're doing a whole host of other things to make sure that your body returns to peak operating condition. Brother, it is so good to hear from you. I'm glad you're doing great. Let's see. Lee Walden. Zach, did you just say discombobulation? Never heard that word before, my friend. Would you please say it again? Discombobulation. I can't even spell the damn thing. I believe you did spell it correct. Discombobulation. Like President Trump, the discombobulator. I love it when he says that. All right. So as we move into the next story here, it's going to be still tied to Somali fraud. And that is an update on Ilhan Omar. Now, today was the day. This was the deadline for Ilhan Omar to hand in the documents that were requested from the committee in Minnesota investigating the fraud that she is tied to. Now, Ilhan Omar has refused to hand that information over, and the committee is forced to take different actions. Let's take a listen.
Squad Democrat Ilhan Omar closing in on a deadline set by Minnesota Republicans to turn over documents about potential ties to a state fraud ring after she dodged a hearing last month. Our senior correspondent Mike Tobin is reporting live out of Chicago. He's got the latest details for us. Hey, Mike.
And Sandra, that deadline is today for Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar to turn over documents and communication tied to defendants in that massive Feeding Our Future scandal. The Minnesota House Committee on Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight is holding its last meeting of the legislative session today. However, the committee does not have enough votes to subpoena the Congresswoman, so the committee doesn't have a legal mechanism to compel Omar to cooperate. The chair of the committee has sent Omar multiple invitations and requests for documents. Omar does not respond. Omar now sponsored the 2020 Meals Act, which removed the guardrails on COVID relief money and helped the fraud run up to $250 million. Despite that, the chair of the Fraud Prevention Committee does not anticipate the Minnesota congressman will respond by the deadline.
It shows her continued disdain for the taxpayers. She feels like she's above having to answer for her involvement in the fraud and her responsibility as a member of Congress who, she passed the bill that took the guardrails off the school nutrition program that led to the conditions that enabled Feeding Our Future.
Now, Amy Bach was convicted as the mastermind of the Feeding Our Future scandal. Defendants billed the government never provided through existing restaurants and sham companies. Now, in Bach's trial, Omar's name appeared in an email chain with Bach. Trial evidence showed text communication with Bach and Omar. Trial evidence also showed Bach exchanged emails with one of the defendants who fled the country. The title of that email chain was Ilhan's Office. Now, back in January, our Alexis McAdams interviewed Amy Bach. She said she never spoke directly with Representative Omar, only people in her office. And the conversation, she said, were never substantive. Sandra, back to you.
All right. So the state government of Minnesota, due to the fact that Democrats essentially control the committee and are controlling the government itself, they're not going to be able to legally hold Ilhan Omar accountable. Now, they could. They could choose to. It's my understanding that Keith Ellison's office has just gone after a local church for $2 million they claim was fraudulently taken from the state government of Minnesota. However, Ilhan Omar is under investigation by the Fraud Task Force and by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for multiple different infractions. Now, if anything is going to happen to Ilhan Omar, it's going to happen at the federal level. That is the only place that this could possibly happen. Now, you may say it's highly unlikely. I will be the first to admit that it would be a long shot, given the history of the United States and their unlikely decision-making when it comes to going after people in high positions of power. But it's not completely unlikely. It has definitely happened. And the Department of Justice has shown in the past that they are willing to go after even sitting members of Congress. If there is anyone that they're willing to go after that would be emblematic of the fraud that we spoke about in the first portion of this program, Ilhan Omar is going to be that person. So I prefer to leave my sunny disposition on the table, praying for the outcome that everybody here is hoping for the outcome that, frankly, Ilhan Omar deserves. So we'll go ahead and continue to follow this story as it develops. Now, I also have an update for you on a story that we talked about last week. This was an illegal alien who was set free by a judge. That illegal alien was wanted for murder in the Dominican Republic. Now, it turns out that a DOJ attorney was forced to issue an apology to the judge, U.S. Judge Melissa Dubose, because that DOJ attorney failed to disclose information that would have obviously changed the ruling that judge put in place. This ICE detainee right here. The judge was never made aware of the fact that he was wanted for murder, and he had an arrest warrant in the Dominican Republic. Brian Rafael Gomez is his name. So although we initially reported on this story very angry with the judge, it would appear that the DOJ attorney is where we should be directing our ire. The judge has now, of course, initially the judge ordered that Gomez be released without knowing all of the details. It sounds like the judge is now in the process of getting a hearing together that should have already happened to consider whether or not to hold the attorney in contempt for concealing material facts. I would really like to know why this DOJ attorney failed to put this very important piece of evidence on the record. Now, this is U.S. Attorney Kevin Bolin, and he says, "I sincerely apologize to Judge DuBose personally and the entire court for the consequences of this lack of disclosure. What the hell were you doing?" James, you want to get banned, James? Okay, go ahead. We'll go ahead and ban you, James. Give me just 1 second, and we'll take care of that for you. Dickwad, there you go. You're done. Good to see you. Sad to see you go. All right. Thank you so much to Sean Joe for the cookie. Sir Lurks a lot for the EMP. Appreciate that support, brother. He says, thank you for all you do, all the hard work. Thank you, Sean Joe, for the cookie. Thank you to Just Josie. Says, much love. Thank you to Sean Joe for the shades and Sean Joe for the can as well. I don't know where Lisa is. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. There you are. Okay. All right. So we'll see what happens with Brian here. Now, President Trump over the weekend had said that he was looking to pull troops out of potentially Spain, Italy, and Germany. Now, initially, that number was only given as 5,000, but President Trump said yesterday that he was actually looking at removing far more than the 5,000 troops that are in Germany. If I remember correctly, there is something like 35,000 troops, like something like half the troops that are in Europe are all stationed in Germany. So this is as a result of Friedrich Merz attempting to downplay President Trump's success on the global stage. And it was reported that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he must accept that President Trump does not share his opinions in order to work with the United States within NATO, but he stressed there was no link between their rift and a planned troop drawdown. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that?
You sure about that? You sure about that?
Now, Merz dismissed the suggestions that his criticism of the U.S. war planning in Iran had sparked Washington's Friday announcement that the U.S. was planning to reduce their troop presence in Germany. The largest European base is in Germany. That one is staffed 5,000 soldiers alone, and he has repeated his commitment to the transatlantic alliance. Personally, I think that President Trump is in the process of destroying NATO. Certainly, removing the United States is our troops and all of the funding that we've been providing for NATO over all the years, billions, perhaps even trillions of dollars, would be devastating to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I have to accept that the American president has a different view on these issues than we do, but that does not change the fact that I remain convinced that the Americans are important partners for us. Now, Merz is trying to decrease the temperature between Germany and the United States, and President Trump said he is planning to withdraw far more than 5,000 troops. Trump indicated, without sharing details, that a substantial further reduction of U.S. troop presence in Germany was imminent just a day after the Pentagon announced that 5,000 troop drawdown. And Trump has also threatened previously last week to roll back troops in the other countries that I mentioned, in Spain and in Italy. Now, before we talk about the next globalist organization that... Ooh, that's the wrong button. Before we talk about the next globalist organization that President Trump is currently in the process of destroying, I do have a very brief message, and for some reason, my Rumble Studio is glitching out. Hold on just a second. I need to re-enter here. Okay, here we are. Okay, I should be back. For some reason, Rumble Studio just totally took a crap on me. But we should be good to go now. All right, you guys. Thank you once again for being here. Hit that like button if you haven't yet. Help us out by sharing the show. Quick message to parents out there and grandparents, of course. America is about to hit a major milestone. We're coming up on America's 250th birthday. That's obviously 250 years of some incredible wins, sacrifices, freedom, grit, the greatest experiment in self-governance the world has ever seen. It's the perfect moment to help your children or grandchildren understand why this country matters. Not simply the fireworks and the hot dogs, but the story behind it all, the underlying reasoning, the rationale for why America is worth preserving. There is a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday. And it's honestly a great way to introduce your kids to how America began and who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why the ideas they fought for are still relevant today. Now, this guide is going to send those kids back to the very moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, and they did so knowing full well that they were risking everything, their lives, their very welfare, their sovereignty, their businesses, their families. It's going to break it all down in a way that kids can actually understand and enjoy, and it's going to do it without watering it down and turning it into boring schoolwork. So if you care as much as I do about raising kids who know where this country came from, making sure they understand why it's worth preserving, this is something that you're going to want to get for them. And the best part, it's completely free with this special offer. You simply pay $2 for shipping and handling. You can pick one of these up by heading to freeusabirthday.com. That is freeusabirthday.com. And the Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday is there for your children today, because America's story matters. So make sure that the next generation knows it. Thank you very much to them. I was watching a very interesting interview today. I found this channel, this guy that I am obsessed with. I've actually spoken about him here on the channel before, but I had never found his work. Over the weekend, I found his channel. His name is Frank Zanu. He is an African intellectual who lives here in the United States, and he's got some really interesting guests that he has on his show, and some very honest appraisals about Black people in the world, about African governance, culture. And he was talking to this Haitian man. And this Haitian man was talking about Haitian people and how seemingly the only thing that they ever want to talk about is the French Revolution. About 200 years ago, the Haitians kicked the French off the island. That was 50 years after the United States of America declared independence. And as messed up as the United States of America is, 250 years later, we have a society that is vastly different than what the Haitians have today. The Haitians are essentially a failed state. It is a state that is rife with corruption. And the people living there, the people governing there, man, I wouldn't trade the United States of America for anything, but it was just striking to compare and contrast Haitian society to American society. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, we have a lot of corruption here. But the level of corruption in Haiti, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of societal stability, man, it's insane to imagine that there's only 50 years separating our countries. It gives me a renewed appreciation for what we have here in the United States. All right. So, yeah, Frank flat out says that Africans can't build anything or maintain anything because in African language, there is no concept for the word maintenance. You look at everything the colonials did. They gave them, beautiful buildings, railroads, all kinds of infrastructure. They ended colonialism. Those people left. None of that stuff works anymore. Apartheid ended in the 90s, and South Africa is now entirely a slum, except for the areas where the Afrikaners live. And in those areas where the Afrikaners live, those people have to live in gated communities. They have to have incredible security systems because the people, the South Africans, they will come in and they will just kill you and they'll take your stuff. It's one of the reasons why you have all of the South African farmers who had to come here as refugees because the black South African government just came in and they still blame white people because rather than moving themselves forward through industry and innovation and good behavior, they prefer to remain in this victim mindset. And it's something that you see among black cultures all around the world. Frank asked the question, as African people, people from Africa or black Americans, what is the one thing that your culture has given to the world? And you ask like a Japanese person, you ask a Chinese person, you ask Americans, what that would be. And I think most people would have an answer. But unfortunately, the people who were black Africans, they didn't have an answer for it. They had nothing that they could imagine that their culture had imprinted upon people all around the world. Now, perhaps an African American, they might say, music or something like that, or achievements in sports. But, even those things were invented by someone else of a different cultural or racial demographic. Anyways, Frank Zanu, Project Rethink, I think is his YouTube channel. Pretty interesting guy to get into. All right, so the United Nations is that other globalist organization, and they are running out of cash. I've reported on this before, but the situation is far more dire right now. If you remember back in January, the United Nations wrote a letter to all of their member countries, 193 different sovereign nations. And the Secretary General warned that at that time, they were in imminent danger of financial collapse. Their cash reserves were nearly exhausted. They hit a record $1.57 billion at the end of 2025. That was more than double the amount outstanding at the end of 2024. So they had $1.57 billion in outstanding dues. Again, more than double. So not just the United States, but most nations that are members of the United Nations are not paying their dues. And if these countries were to continue not paying their dues, the Secretary General warned that the United Nations would run out of money in July. Well, July is right around the corner, and that crisis has been compounded by a structural rule. That rule requires the United Nations to return unspent budget funds to member states, even when those funds were never collected in the first place. So that means that all of the states who didn't pay in, obviously the United Nations couldn't spend the money they never received. And so it's kind of a loophole where all of these countries have to be given money that they never actually gave in the first place. So in 2026, the UN was forced to return $227 million that they never received in the first place, with an additional $72 million offset against arrears. Now, Guterres, who is the Secretary General, described this as a Kafkaesque cycle, expected to give back cash that does not exist. I personally find it to be hilarious. This is very entertaining. So in order to address the shortfall, the UN had to cut their budget from $3.72 billion to $3.45 billion. They had to fire about 2,900 staff positions, nearly a fifth of their workforce. They had to slash special political mission allocations by 21%. There was wide-scale non-payment from member states that has simply continued to accelerate. In 2025, 42 of those 193 member states failed to pay their assessments in full. And by February 8th of this year, the same due date that more dues were due, only 55 countries had paid. So they went from 42 countries not paying to 140 more countries not paying, which is absolutely insane. 100 roughly, because 42 of 193 did not pay before. So the United States is actually the dominant factor here. Historically, the largest contributor at 22% of peacekeeping and regular budgets is us. It's the United States. Roughly $820 million a year is what we pay in. But we paid no dues at all in 2025, and that accounts for approximately 95% of all unpaid contributions currently owed. Like I said before, President Trump is destroying the previous rules-based order. These global governance organizations that are designed to steal sovereignty from nations like us and so many others around the world by not paying our dues in 2025 and then again in 2026. The United States has essentially starved the United Nations of any relevant budget operations they could have outlaid. The total U.S. debt stands at $2.2 billion to the regular operating budget, $767 million for 2026, and the remainder of that is from 2025. Plus, we've got another $1.8 billion that's apparently owed for peacekeeping operations, and then another $528 million for past peacekeeping operations. Now, in August of last year, President Trump canceled $800 million in peacekeeping funds previously appropriated for both 2024 and 2025. And the White House budget has also since proposed eliminating all U.S. peacekeeping funding for the year of 2026. We also know, reported on it at the time, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from at least 66 international organizations, which include 31 that are within the umbrella of the UN system, all part of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN Democracy Fund, UN Oceans, and UN Women. Now, in mid-February of this year, the U.S. made a first partial payment towards that debt, which a UN spokesperson confirmed goes towards past dues on the regular budget. As of May, now, the U.S. has paid approximately $160 million of the more than $4 billion they owe across regular and peacekeeping budgets combined. I don't know why we're paying anything at all. Guterres has stated that the outstanding assessed contributions are non-negotiable, which is a mandatory legal obligation of membership, and has stressed that non-payment and reform are two different issues. A UN spokesperson was blunter. When it comes to paying, it's now or never. Well, if we don't pay, then I guess there is no UN. Now, the Trump organization has framed this position as leverage because that is what President Trump does best, the creation of leverage. Now, the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, told Congress that the UN has drifted from its core mission of peacekeeping and confirmed the administration has conditioned payment upon reform. We've withheld this year. We haven't paid any, and my first meeting with the Secretary General was, here are the reforms that we need to see before you start talking about taxpayer dollars. Now, Waltz also argued that the organization needs to be cut up, reformed before any U.S. money flows again, pointing out that 7 separate UN agencies work on climate change alone. So if that's where that money is going, then obviously we're not going to continue to pay it. This administration has branded its approach as Make the UN Great Again, MUNGA. In April of 2026 Senate testimony, Mike Waltz cited $570 million in UN budget cuts and the elimination of nearly 3,000 headquartered positions as evidence the pressure is producing the results that we want to see. Ambassador for Management and Reform Jeff Bartos stated flatly, the UN has to stop doing stupid things. So the administration's case for cutting or eliminating UN funding rests upon documented institutional failures. These are not new failures. These failures span decades. As Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated at the 2026 Munich Security Conference, the UN failed to stop the war in Gaza. They failed to end the war in Ukraine, and they failed to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions. The failure in Ukraine is structural and chronic. When Russia moved to annex Crimea in 2014, the Secretary Council convened 7 emergency sessions, only to watch Russia veto the sole draft resolution, which was supported by 13 of 15 members. That would have declared the referendum invalid. Now, the General Assembly passed a non-binding resolution which affirmed Ukraine's territorial integrity, but Russia ignored it. 8 years later, Russia launched a full-scale invasion, and the Security Council was paralyzed by that same veto. Peacekeeping missions, What peacekeeping missions in Mali, Lebanon, and the Democratic Republic of Congo have all been judged as massive failures by this administration's own ambassador, Mike Waltz. Waltz told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the UN budget has quadrupled over 25 years, and yet we have not seen a quadrupling of peace. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton, who is still an outspoken critic of President Trump, told the Associated Press that the UN is probably in the worst shape it's been in since it was founded. They have consistently failed to counter the Iranian regime or to intervene when the regime has on several occasions killed thousands of protesters. Allegedly, I haven't seen it. But during the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising, Iranian security forces are alleged to have killed at least 551 verified protesters, which supposedly includes 68 children, 49 women, and that was across 26 of Iran's 31 provinces. The UN established a fact-finding mission, and they concluded the killings constituted crimes against humanity, including murder, torture, and rape, yet Iran faced no binding Security Council action because the UN has no authority. When protests erupted again in late December 2025 after economic collapse, the crackdown was even deadlier. Amnesty International documented massacres concentrated on January 8th and 9th of this year, suggesting death toll estimates rose above 30,000 based on hospital data, but the United Nations issued statements and then took no enforceable action. I mean, what would they be able to do? Burma, Myanmar, presents the longest-running case. That conflict has spanned nearly 8 decades, which makes it the longest ongoing civil war. The military rejected a 1990 landslide election won by Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, and they kept Aung San Suu Kyi under house arrest. Now, when the NLD won again by a large margin in 2020, the military staged a coup in February of 2021, and they detained the civilian government, and they killed more than 600 protesters in that initial crackdown. And the UN's own human rights expert told the Human Rights Council that the international response is a failure, and a special advisory council on Myanmar called the UN response woefully inadequate. The conflict has since displaced 3.6 million people and produced more than 95,000 deaths. The institution itself has been politically captured. The Human Rights Council routinely seats governments with records of systemic abuse in oversight roles, and a UN special rapporteur praised Somalia's human rights record before the council while condemning U.S. counterterrorism strikes as naked aggression, even as Human Rights Watchdog documented Somalia's deteriorating conditions and al-Shabaab's advance towards Mogadishu. The UN Rights Watch acknowledged that 9 of their staff members may have participated in the October 7th attack in Israel. Against this record, the UN's response to Trump acting against despotic regimes has been swift condemnation. When Trump captured Nicolas Maduro and removed him from Venezuela in January, Guterres deeply declared that he was deeply alarmed by the U.S. action and warned that it set a dangerous precedent. But the Security Council convened an emergency session at the request of Colombia, backed by Russia and China, which are the same powers whose vetoes have shielded Maduro over the years, also shielded the Iranian regime, and shielded the Myanmar junta from accountability for many, many years. That body that stood idle during decades of massacres, stolen elections, civilian bombings, finally found their voice at the moment the United States acted against what they called a narco dictatorship. Now, President Trump has a lot of valid gripes with the UN, and he also doesn't believe that the United Nations should have this disproportionate funding burden carried by us, the taxpayer, when we don't get anything out of the United Nations. We pay 22% of that regular budget, 25% of peacekeeping costs. China, they're the world's largest economy, but they're traded as a developing nation across all of these UN agencies. They get favorable status that reduces their assessed share. China has simultaneously nearly doubled their staffing at the UN agencies over the past decade, while U.S. representation has declined, which places us at a disadvantage compared to CCP interests when the United Nations makes decisions. In April of this year, China vetoed a Security Council missile revolution that would have forced Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Senator Jeanne Shaheen warned during Waltz's confirmation hearing that U.S. disengagement risks allowing Beijing to write the rules on technology, AI, health, human rights, which is an argument that cuts both ways because the U.S. is currently subsidizing the institutional infrastructure that China is methodically colonizing with their own personnel. Not to mention that China sends people here to have babies and then become citizens of the United States, goes back and comes back and steals our intellectual property. So the only outcome that I personally can see is the United Nations shutting down. It doesn't seem like we're going to be giving them any money anytime soon. And like I said, July is right around the corner. They have less than 2 months of money available to them. And if the United States doesn't bail them out, then they're no longer an organization that can continue. If they do not have the money to continue, if they don't have the power to do what's necessary to help end wars, if they don't have the courage or the wherewithal to get involved in conflicts and do what the United Nations was tasked with doing, then I see no reason to continue them. But I'll tell you who is successful at ending conflicts and what is also funded, not because of other nations, but simply because of President Trump. That would be the Board of Peace. And President Trump has already unilaterally ended 8 conflicts around the world. We may have stopped a larger conflict from happening in the Middle East through the intervention in Iran. And I believe that very soon we're going to have peace in Europe because we're going to be bringing Europe to a head with Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine just has to get used to the idea that they're no longer going to have a significant portion of land in the eastern portion of the country. So the UN is dead. Long live the Board of Peace. All right, Zach, would you consider to host of a small roundtable, 3 guests from Badlanders, Miss You, and Brad, America Wants More, the glass half full? So, I mean, you know, I might do something like a roundtable, but I mean, probably not. I don't want to do any more shows than I already do. And I am still trying to determine whether or not I'm going to fill that time slot at 9 p.m. on Badlands, but I have to have a concept that I think I would be able to bring every single week. And, you know, I have to be honest, there was just something special about me and Brad doing that show together. I just talked to Brad yesterday, and we were actually talking about this. And, you know, maybe in the future there might be something that Brad and I do, but it's not going to be right now. He's got a lot of stuff that he has to do with this property, and I simply don't know what I would do with that 9 p.m. time slot. But I hear you. I hear you. And then let's see. Lee Walden says, no more Mr. Nice Guy. By the way, did you see the new post by Trump about nice? If you are talking about the nice as in like the new name for ice, yes, but maybe there's a new one. All right. So President Trump, during an event yesterday, once again sent the mainstream media and the political left into a tizzy when he joked during the small business roundtable yesterday, the summit, that he wasn't going to be leaving office anytime soon and that he might even spend another 8 or 9 years in office. Let me just go ahead and play that for you.
And this way, when I get out of office, in, let's say, 8 or 9 years from now, I'll be able to use it. I'll be able to use it myself.
I love him so much when he just trolls people and oh my goodness. All right. Now, we talk a lot about bad judges on the show, bad decisions made by people in positions of authority. But this is the exact opposite. I'm going to play. Well, I'll set it up. Okay, so this was a judge that was handed a deal by a prosecutor for this defendant. The judge knew the history of this defendant, and the judge rejected the plea deal that the prosecutor was trying to make. This is quite literally a violent recidivist sexual predator. It's not just, you know, some guy who downloaded some pictures on the internet and tries to make a case that he doesn't know what he was doing. No, this is a guy who was found with tens of thousands of images. It wasn't just any images. These are images that this guy created himself. He produced this content, and he did it by victimizing a family member. So this is about a 4-minute clip, but I think it's worth watching because this is the kind of defendant who, under many judges here in the United States, might have walked free with probation. But this judge looked at this guy's history and she said, no, I'm not going to let this happen.
But I already signed for probation.
I don't have to accept your probation.
I wasn't told that.
Yeah, you actually were, because we reset your case for sentencing. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter. All right, are you Robert Lowe?
Yes, ma'am.
And so Mr. Lowe was previously in court, entered pleas of guilty to 3 cases of possession of child pornography. There was an agreement in those 3 cases for a 7-year deferred probation and a $1,000 fine with dismissals, I think, in 3 or 4 other cases. I've received the pre-sentence report. Has everyone had an opportunity to review that report?
Yes, Your Honor.
I feel like this is different from some of these types of cases because Mr. Lowe was actually involved in creating with his own family member victim who was very young, 5 years old. So this wasn't I downloaded something and didn't realize what I was downloading. This is very different. This is a family member that was victimized because of this. Don't talk right now, okay?
Shut your mouth, boy. Not the time.
And so for those reasons, I do not feel comfortable accepting deferred probations in these cases. So I'm going to reject those plea offers. I don't know, honestly, I haven't thought more about what I would be amenable to other than potentially just letting a jury decide. I'll reset it one time. You guys negotiate, see where you are on it. And if you come up with something, you can contact me. Otherwise, we'll get rejections and get his cases set for trial and let a jury decide one way or the other. Okay? I'm just not comfortable with this at all. You can go back with the bailiff.
But I already signed for probation.
I don't have to accept your probation.
I wasn't told that.
Yeah, you actually were, because we reset your case for sentencing. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter if you were or not. I'm not accepting the plea agreements, okay? There's nothing you can do at this point other than Ms. Holmes will be out there to visit with you about any other options. And if you don't like those options, or if I don't like those options, then ultimately that's what a jury is for. If everyone can't agree, and then we get a jury to come in and determine if you're guilty and what the punishment is if you are found guilty. Okay, so let's see where we're. I'm not going to consider any bonds at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. I just his mother is here, and so but just for the record, because I have spoken with her on several occasions, as well as with Mr. Lowe. They did keep asking me if he would get out today, and my response to both of them was that it's up to the judge. At the end of the day. So
Thank you,
I
Ms.
told
Holmes.
you that yesterday
Yes, ma'am.
when I visited with you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I told that to your mother.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
ultimately it's up to the court on whether you would be released today and placed on probation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. You can go back with the bailiff.
I can't say nothing else.
It's probably not wise right now. Okay, go back with the bailiff.
Probably not a good idea to open your filthy, stinking mouth. Now, this was Christopher Lowe. Christopher Lowe thought he had made a sweetheart deal with this prosecutor, and it seems like the prosecutor was going to allow it to happen. But that judge you saw there, Judge Raquel West, she saw what he pled guilty to, what he was going to get away with. He was just going to walk away with probation for the types of crimes. The audacity for this guy thinking that he was going to get a second chance. The audacity of the prosecutor, frankly. Lowe was not a casual offender. Again, he was a predator that was caught in an international dragnet Investigators found mountains of evidence on his hard drive, over 17,000 images, hundreds of videos involving the most vulnerable members of our society, children as young as 2 years old. This was something this guy was deeply involved in, and the children who were victimized are never going to be the same. Never going to be the same. I cannot believe the number of people just like Mr. Lowe who do end up on probation, who get that so-called second chance. It makes me sick. It burns my soul in a way that I cannot describe, because those children will never get a second chance. Those children, no matter how old or young they are, they will forever be saddled with the burden of knowing what happened to them. And for some people, that can be devastating. For many people, it's something that ends up defining their life, and not in a good way. So Judge West saw the facts of this case. She knew exactly what was up. He was already staring 45 years in federal prison, and Judge West made sure that he was going to spend all of that. She handed down that leniency, and after the trial, gave him a 75-year sentence. 75 years. So I felt like when I saw this, I had to bring it to you guys, because I cannot count for you the number of times that I brought you stories of bad judges doing things that obviously anybody in a right mind would never have allowed these criminals to get away with. And Judge Raquel West is the best example of the way a judge is supposed to behave. Standing up for victims, making sure this guy never sets foot in the sun ever again, never in a position to hurt another child. And so I felt like it was worthy of your appraisal, okay? People need to see that there are judges like this out there. So when we talk about the corruption in the judicial system, the broken nature of the system, we have to remember that, yeah, actually there are still real judges out there. So thank you so much, Judge West. All right. Now, Justice Alito was just forced to respond to Ketanji Brown Jackson, the AutoPen SCOTUS DEI hire. And this was in regards to the Louisiana redistricting decision that just came down. So last month, obviously, we reported that Louisiana's newly drawn congressional map was determined to be unconstitutional. It was a 6-3 ruling. Sotomayor, Kagan, and DEI Jackson were the ones who wrote the dissenting opinion. The case was two cases, State of Louisiana versus Calais, and then Press Robinson versus Calais. That congressional map that was unconstitutional was majority-minority, 2 congressional majority-minority districts, and so now they're going to be redrawn. Now, as you know, Louisiana was scheduled to hold primaries on May 16th. That was now, by order of the governor, postponed. And on Monday, the Supreme Court has now fast-tracked the timeline in order to get those congressional districts redrawn so we can have a primary based upon constitutional congressional districts. Now, Justice Jackson wrote in her dissenting opinion some pretty nasty things about the people that she works with on a daily basis. So this decision by the Supreme Court immediately puts into effect their ruling. It invalidates the congressional maps currently, and it left conservative Justice Samuel Alito and liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson on opposing sides. And as Ketanji Brown Jackson is prone to do, she opened her mouth in a way that she probably shouldn't. So this order that was written by the court speeds up the normal 32-day timeline, which allows for this decision to be put in play so that the districts can be redrawn. And Ketanji Brown Jackson did not like that fact. So essentially, Jackson wrote in her dissent that the majority unshackles itself from constraints and that the court should follow the default rule. Now, keeping in mind if the default rule is followed, then Louisiana is forced to hold elections using unconstitutional congressional districts. This is the reason that they forgoed that 32-day rule, and they pushed up the timeline to force it to take effect immediately. Now, Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, they're all obviously part of the mostly conservative wing of the court. They called one part of Jackson's dissent baseless and insulting. The dissent in this suit levels charges that cannot go unanswered. And the dissent would require that the 2026 congressional elections in Louisiana be held under a map that has already been decided to be unconstitutional. So it doesn't make any sense. And as always, Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinions are based not in law, not in history, not in precedents, and not even in the findings of the court, but based upon emotion, a lack of logic. So this ruling by the court to put this into effect immediately is the best remedy for an unconstitutional map. So Justice Brown Jackson, Ketanji Brown Jackson, said in her opinion that these decisions have spawned chaos in the South. To avoid the appearance of partiality here, we could, as per usual, opt to stay on the sidelines and take no position by applying our default procedures, but today the court chose the opposite. Well, I would imagine, I believe that what Ketanji Brown Jackson is asking for would be the sowing of chaos, because the entire state of Louisiana would be forced for the next 2 years to have representatives that were elected unconstitutionally. They would deprive the citizens of Louisiana the proper representation under the Constitution. And it would be wholly something that must be remedied. Why not remedy it right now? That's exactly what we're doing. Okay, now Lee Walden says, millstones at the ready for the reckoning. Amen, sir. Thank you very much to No Thanks Joe, who says, hey there, Lisa and Zach. Happy Taco Tuesday to you both. Always great reporting. I appreciate you. Thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says, hit that red pill. I hit the red pill and the stream broke. It was the fault of Rumble Studio. Thank you, sir, for being here. Sean Joe, thank you for 2 cookies. Thank you to Filter Dog. You and Brad make a great team. I love Brad. He will always be one of my best friends. He was the best man at my wedding for a reason. Thank you to Sean Joe for 2 cookies. Thank you to Filter Dog. Will Ketanji Brown Jackson get removed because of the auto pen? I sincerely hope so, but we'll need to see how a prosecution of Anthony Fauci would shape up, because I think that the auto pen is obviously going to come into play because of Fauci's blanket pardon. Filter Dog, thank you again. Darla says, re-examination of the auto pen. Yes, that is what we're all waiting for. All right. Now, we need to next go to Washington, D.C. Now, we've reported previously on the cover-up of crime data in the district and how that was done by a number of high-level officials. Well, now, as a direct result of those findings, multiple senior officials in the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department are facing termination or discipline as these investigations continue, according to multiple law enforcement sources who have spoken with the Washington Post. We've got several high-ranking officers, which include 2 assistant chiefs, who have received or are expected to receive disciplinary notices tied to this internal affairs probe into the reporting of those crime statistics. That includes Assistant Chief Lachey Mackle and 2nd District Commander Tatiana Savoy, who have both been placed on administrative leave. Now, both of them are linked to the cover-up of these crime statistics in the investigation. In that investigation, we find that officials are alleged to have lied or manipulated the crime statistics in the district. Former 3rd District Commander Michael Pulliam is also under review. He was placed on leave back in 2025. There were allegations that crime classifications in the district had been altered. They have, and it is inevitably going to lead to firings. Now, Pulliam has, of course, denied any wrongdoing, but he remains the subject of an active investigation and possible discipline. Assistant Chief Andre Wright is facing a separate investigation after allegedly inappropriate text messages were found on his phone. He has already been placed on administrative leave. And the investigation continues even further than that. The internal probe is focused on whether or not department supervisors were downgrading serious crimes to less severe categories, potentially making crime rates appear lower than they actually were. Well, we've seen this throughout D.C. in a number of ways. The investigations have already shown that many more serious crimes were taking place, yet people were being charged with downgraded crimes. So, of course, you wouldn't have to report a felony if you just charge them with a misdemeanor, or if the prosecuting attorney simply lets them off the hook. Let's go ahead and take a look at this.
Several top police commanders in Washington, D.C. could be out of a job for allegedly cooking the books when it comes to crime data. Mark Meredith has been looking into all of this, and he joins us now. Hi, Mark.
John, I sure have. Good to see you. D.C. leaders insist the city is a safer place now than it was during the pandemic, but there are reports multiple metropolitan police leaders may soon lose their jobs amid an investigation into alleged manipulation of crime data. Now, D.C. police are not confirming this report. They say they don't comment on personal matters, but this is seen as a sweeping shakeup among the capital's police force.
Hold on. Over on YouTube, Pavoom says, yeah, but if he were black. I don't know which story you're referring to. Several of those officers that were downgraded or fired in the D.C. Metropolitan Police were black, both men and women. Or if you're perhaps referring to the pedophile, if he were black, I don't care. Either way, somebody's a pedophile. I want them to be imprisoned or executed.
Washington Post writes multiple high-ranking police officials have been served papers basically saying the department intends to fire them, according to people familiar with the situation. D.C. crime still a national issue. The president's decision to deploy National Guard troops to assist law enforcement throughout the district. Those troops, they are still on duty, and they may be here for quite some time. But in D.C., teen violence remains a huge problem. Today, D.C. City's Council is looking to take a vote whether to make a juvenile curfew permanent. D.C.'s mayor, Democrat Muriel Bowser, she is pushing for the curfew to stay in place. She says this is not about punishment, but protection. She sent a letter to the council today in which she said, quote, the intent of the curfew is not to arrest our young people. It's to keep them safe. Curfew zones steer young people away from potentially dangerous situations before they escalate. But not everyone thinks this is a good idea. Opponents argue that the curfew leads to over-policing. The measure, though, also, even if it's approved by the council today, John, it would still require congressional approval, meaning it could take some time, and summer's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, those so-called youths definitely need to be kept under curfew. Now, that is a symptom of a much larger problem. When you have a city like, or a district like the District of Columbia, where so many young people are prone to engage in criminal behavior, you need to start looking at home. What is going on at home? Where is the breakdown in the family? Does a nuclear family even exist, or are the parents in this situation coming from a broken home? Are both of those parents criminals at the end of the day as well? Or are these kids simply getting a lack of education? Are they being influenced by larger criminal activity that is going on? But it was said by Representative James Comer, who had spearheaded part of this investigation. He said, make no mistake, top D.C. law enforcement terminations are due to the Oversight Committee exposing how D.C. police leaders manipulated crime data and cultivated a culture of fear to push an agenda. This isn't over. I want every document from MPD's internal investigation. So this is another excellent example of something that was a long time coming. Now, we first learned about these crime statistics being massaged last year. So in order to get to the place where we are today, where these people are finally being fired, where they're losing their jobs, it took time. There needed to be an investigation. We needed to prove into a sufficient degree that these people were, in fact, manipulating crime statistics in order to make it appear as if D.C. was a much safer place than before. When President Trump first came in and took over the district with the National Guard, crime immediately stopped. So this, again, means that the system is working thanks to President Trump. If it were not for President Trump and his efforts over this 14, 15 months that he's been in power, the District of Columbia would still be run by people like this man right here. and the crime would still be committed. There would be no safety. There would be no security. These people would be running amok. Now, we also have this tweet coming from the DC Police Union confirming the termination papers that we just talked about have been served to numerous high-ranking top brass command staff. These are not just rank-and-file Metro DC police officers. These are the people at the top of the food chain. The terminations are tied to the investigation we just mentioned, the deliberate manipulation of crime data. Justice is served. Accountability begins for command staff implicated in crime stat manipulation scandal. Now, looking at the press release, the DC Police Union, representing 3,000 active officers of the MPD, today welcomes the Metropolitan Police Department's decision to serve termination papers to multiple high-ranking command staff officials. These actions, tied directly to the department's completed Internal Affairs Division investigation into the deliberate manipulation of crime data, marks a long overdue step towards justice and the restoration of integrity within the MPD. In our December 15th, 2025 press release, the DC Police Union stood alone in condemning the systemic pattern of crime data manipulation under former Chief Pamela Smith. We exposed how command staff pressured patrol commanders to downgrade serious violent and property felonies, assaults with a dangerous weapon, robberies, burglaries, motor vehicle thefts, all to fabricate the illusion of falling crime rates while actual crime was surging. We cited the damning findings from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia and the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform's investigation, which confirmed that internal national incident-based reporting systems data reported to the FBI showed a 1.72% increase in violent crime for 2024, directly contradicting the D.C. government's fabricated 28.32% decrease. We warned this toxic culture of coercion, fear, and corruption left thousands of cases uninvestigated, denied victims justice, gaslit residents, and endangered public safety. Forensic teams were never dispatched. Evidence went uncollected. Detectives were never notified, and dangerous criminals walked free, all while the public was fed falsified daily crime report numbers. Yes, it may have taken time, but my friends, it actually happened. Thank you again to Lee Walden, and thank you very much to Hogleg71 for the cookie. Now, take a look at this. We go from a good decision by one judge to another good decision from a panel of judges. This, however, in my opinion, is not nearly as far as it needed to go. What we're seeing here is an assistant district attorney who filed case papers with fabricated AI material in them. This was a murder case. This woman filed this paperwork in a murder case and then lied about it because it included AI-generated information. This should be a lesson to anybody that simply because AI spits out information for you, it doesn't mean that it's real. It doesn't mean that it's relevant. It doesn't mean that it's accurate. Now, the good news is she will be suspended from performing law for 6 months. I think she should have had her law license taken indefinitely. But take a listen to this. This is her being questioned by the Georgia Supreme Court.
So before you sit down, there's one more thing I need to ask you about, unfortunately.
I should also mention that when a judge in a case like this asks a question, they already know the answer. So you better come correct.
In reviewing the trial court's order denying the motion for new trial, there are at least 5 citations to cases that don't exist. And there's at least 5 more citations to cases that do not support the proposition for which they're cited, including 3 quotations that don't exist. My understanding is that you prepared the order for new trial, the denial order for the trial court. Were those citations in the version of the order that you submitted to the trial court?
No, Your Honor, I do not believe so. They were not. I did prepare an order. That order was revised.
So those non...
Hold on. That's actually incorrect, ma'am.
Non-existent cases were cited in your initial brief opposing the motion for new trial.
Your Honor, I'm not aware of that, but I would be glad to research that and provide the court with a supplement.
Okay. So before you sit down.
She's got no business practicing law. She's got no business acting as an assistant district attorney. That woman should never be allowed into a courtroom ever again. All right, but I still applaud the justices for taking her law license for 6 months. It should have gone a lot longer. Now, I don't know how much emphasis or truth to put into this story, but apparently the White House and Republicans in the Senate are working to flip John Fetterman. If John Fetterman was to change party affiliations, it would be mostly symbolic because John Fetterman generally votes with Democrats. However, as we have seen since he came into office, there have been quite a few instances where he seemed to spar rather publicly with the Democrat caucus. So allegedly, Fetterman is being courted by Republicans ahead of the midterms in support of this pursuit to get him to flip. And it would certainly give one more number to the Republicans. Now, this report states that President Trump has made an offer, essentially offering Fetterman his total and complete endorsement, plus he would, of course, get money from the Republican Party. Now, a handful of Senate Republicans are also looking to meet with John Fetterman and responding to concerns he might have over the prospect of defecting from the Democrat Party. But if Fetterman does flip, officials are saying, based upon the condition of anonymity, that it would be in thanks large part to his deepening friendship with a pair of senators and their high-profile spouses. Those senators are Dave McCormick of Pennsylvania, his wife Dina, and Senator Katie Britt, who is a Republican from Alabama, and her husband Wesley. Now, President Trump, of course, knows a thing or two about party switching. He's done this himself. He's told one GOP senator he prefers Fetterman making the full conversion to Republican, according to a source familiar. And Trump has said if Fetterman does, he would reciprocate. In his typical unsubtle fashion, the president conveyed as much to Sean Hannity in March, and he asked Hannity if he could play intermediary. Now, if John Fetterman does flip, I don't know how much of a difference it would make. I mean, yes, we would have one more number in the Senate, but I don't know that Fetterman would really substantially change the way he votes. Now, Fetterman has actually commented on this. He said, I would be a shitty Republican. I'm not changing. I'm a Democrat, and I'm staying one. Again, I'd be a shitty Republican. However, it does note that Fetterman has refused to consider... Fetterman has refused to consider joining the GOP. He is not pushing back against suggestions that he may serve as an independent. This, to me, is a far more likely scenario because, as you know, he was elected in 2022. He defeated a Republican, and now that Republican is serving as Trump's administrator in the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. But since his election, he has taken a number of positions that have infuriated Democrats and the more radical of this left-wing group. Now, these have included wholesale support for Israel. They certainly don't like that. Not a lot of people do nowadays. Also, allowing immigration and customs enforcement officials to carry out their duties and pushing back against that more radical element of the Democrat Party. Just last month, several leading Democrats publicly called for Fetterman to be ousted after he voted to confirm Mark Wayne Mullen, who is President Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security now. He's also maintained that his vote was rooted in a strong, committed, constructive working relationship with Senator Mullen for our nation's security. They knew each other when they were in the Senate together. So, again, I think it's most likely that Fetterman just might leave the Democrat Party, become an independent, and he's already said on a number of occasions, he doesn't like the things that the party is doing. One less Democrat, I will go ahead and consider that a win. Now, Senator Eric Schmidt has posted the findings of Homeland Security and U.S. Customs and Immigration Services on the state of H-1B fraud that is being perpetrated on Americans. He just received the official Customs and Immigration Services fiscal year 2025 H-1B report. Listen to this. In fiscal year 2025, there was over 406,348. H-1B is supposed to be maintained as a program for highly skilled workers in various fields. But what it really is a scam system that allows a flood of foreign labor to come into the United States. Sovereignty, security, and basic morality be damned, he says. 62% of all H-1B approvals are tech-related occupations. Over 252,000. Over 60% of all approvals were for tech and IT roles that Americans can already fill. That means that Americans lost their jobs to bring H-1B visa recipients in. Big tech is who is really driving that. They use this program to import cheap replacements while they lay off U.S. workers. It's totally disgusting. Now, of course, that number is changing now that people have to be brought in with a $100,000 fee tied to their name. But Washington continues to pat themselves on the back, and Americans hold the bag. They get sacked, and they're unable to get a job back in their industries. They just get completely replaced by H-1B hires. The entire system is designed to let companies take advantage of the law that created the H-1B visa, and Americans who graduated from college with these very specific skills are then unable to get jobs in the industry. The data is very clear. India brings in almost 70% of H-1B recipients, 283,772 approvals. And continuing employment extensions of H-1B make up 72% of that total. What's really shocking is that the vast majority of those Indian H-1B recipients have been found to have completely faked their credentials. An ex-visa officer in India shared this dirty secret. 70 to 90% of Indian applicants have gamed the system using fake credentials, and then Indian workers hire their own while firing Americans from their jobs. Once they get in, they stay in, they bring more people, and American talent gets left out in the dust. This is from that former worker. 20 years ago, I served as one of 15 junior visa officers at the U.S. consulate in Chennai, India, the H-1B visa fraud capital of the world. We adjudicated thousands of visas daily in an environment where 70 to 90% of applicants sought to exploit the non-immigrant visa system to live and work in the U.S. illegally. While we could reject most fraudulent applications, H-1Bs were different. They came pre-approved by the Department of Homeland Security, making denials rare, only around 2%. Revocations required laborious after-hours legal memos, work few had the time to do while processing 200 visas a day. H-1B visas became the perfect loophole for many Indian nationals aged 20 to 45 to enter the U.S. with fraudulent or inflated credentials, displacing qualified American IT and STEM workers. From 2005 to 2007, Chennai adjudicated roughly 100,000 H-1Bs annually. Today, demand has exploded to 400,000 or more per year. In Silicon Valley, Indian origin managers and executives frequently favor hiring fellow Indian H-1B visa holders, creating barriers for American workers and fostering ethnic preference. Companies like Microsoft filed thousands of H-1B petitions, 6,327 in 2025, 78% of which were for Indian nationals. And at the same time, they laid off 9,000 American employees. Obviously, we are displacing American workers in favor of bringing in people from other countries. And that is simply not right. And China, they're also flooding sensitive tech and science roles. And of course, as we've talked about on so many occasions, the CCP sends these individuals here to the United States so they can then spy on us. They can steal our IP. They can take trade secrets from U.S. companies. H-1B is an economic betrayal, but it's also a national security nightmare. Why on earth should the American people lose their jobs so that we can fund CCP crimes? 50,000 Chinese nationals were approved in 2025 alone. Again, this is a national security nightmare, and it's not going to end unless we shut it down. The H-1B program is displacing American workers. It's destroying our national security. And enough is enough. We should no longer be flooding the market with 400,000 or more H-1B foreign workers coming in with visas while our people and our sovereignty gets screwed. So Eric Schmidt is leading the charge to reform the H-1B program. And personally, I've said this before, we need a moratorium on all immigration, whether it's the visa system or people coming in, seeking to gain some type of American citizenship or green cards. We should let no more people into this country. We need to shut it down right now because we can't get a hold on what we have here until we finally can even determine exactly who those people are. Now, we also have this coming from Just the News. Jim Jordan, who is, of course, the House Judiciary Chairman Committee Chairman, has sent letters to Philadelphia officials seeking information on their sanctuary city policies. He's accusing these officials of prioritizing criminal and illegal migrants over American citizens, very similar to what they're doing with H-1Bs. He's also accusing Larry Krasner's office for the past decade of openly giving preferential treatment to illegal aliens based on their immigration status. He believes that these low-level and nonviolent crimes should not lead to deportation or automatically risk their status, so Larry Krasner tends simply not to charge these people. Even in cases involving murder and crimes against minors, prosecutor in Krasner's office might still consider a criminal's alien potential deportation or other immigration consequences when they make decisions on prosecution. So then they end up favoring the illegal alien. And of course, that leaves victims, American victims, out in the cold. The shielding of criminal illegal aliens from immigration enforcement in Philadelphia undermines public safety, and it thwarts the efficient enforcement of federal law. Now, Jordan is also claiming that the sheriff's office has obstructed federal law enforcement from making safe immigration arrests at multiple places in Philadelphia, which includes the courthouse. The police department has allegedly failed to comply with immigration and customs enforcement detainers for many years. That includes ignoring a detainer for an illegal immigrant who had been arrested for aggravated assault, strangulation, reckless endangerment, and criminal mischief. Now, this letter that's been sent to Philadelphia and the district attorney's office there, Larry Krasner, is going to be read, and they must present information within a certain period of time. But if they investigate this and investigate it properly, they're going to find that Larry Krasner and many other state and local government organizations within Philadelphia have put American lives at risk to the point that I think that blood is on their hands. All right, before we continue, I have a very brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. Thank you very much for being here, guys. If you haven't yet, hit that like button. I do have a quick question for you, and it's a good one. How much control do you have over your own money right now? Because technology has changed, and technology is everything. It is moving along at a very rapid clip. It's changing how money works. Crypto started out as a niche, but now it's pretty much mainstream. You get faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. It's not hype. It's just where things are going right now. And it's getting started today that is going to help you maintain control over your money. And it's a lot easier than you think it might be. This is where the Rumble Wallet comes in. Because with Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, you can hold dollar-backed stablecoins, you can even own digital gold that is backed by real gold, and it's all in one place. You can start small, $10, $50, $100. It's not about the amount. It's just about getting in early and understanding what comes next. And then once you're all set up, you can even use the Rumble wallet to tip your favorite creators like myself or others, and you can do that directly. So in order to get the Rumble wallet, you can scan that QR code on screen. You can click the link that's in the description, or you can download the Rumble wallet from wallet.rumble.com or the App Store on your device. And from there, you set up your wallet, you connect your Rumble account, and then you just tap buy and you're in the game. So take control of your own money and get started with the Rumble wallet today. Thank you very much to them. And of course, anybody who donates using the Rumble wallet, it will show up in the chat just like a regular Rumble rant, and I'm going to read it. All right, Marco Rubio announced in a press conference earlier today that Operation Epic Fury has concluded. There's been some speculation about this. President Trump said that hostilities were over the other day. And then yesterday, there was some munitions that were traded back and forth. Iran hit some targets in the UAE. The United States took out some Iranian boats. The United States is now ushering boats through the Straits of Hormuz. But Marco Rubio says hostilities have ended.
On the war, if the fighting were to resume, because you've said that Operation Epic Fury is over, the president also said that the U.S. would bomb them off the face of the earth if they tried to go after U.S. ships. So if the fighting resumes, are you saying that it would resume under Project Freedom? And I ask, as it relates to the War Powers Act.
Yeah, look, the Operation Epic Fury is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer.
It boggles my mind every time when people get upset at the comments that President Trump makes. If you're the president of the United States of America, you have to make the rest of the world believe that you are willing to use the power of your nation, which includes the military. If you're not willing to use that power, then no one takes you seriously and everybody's going to do whatever they want. Take a look at the Biden administration as an example. Now, Pete Hegseth and Raisin Kane were also there. Another story that came out in the last couple of days was that Iran was going to be using killer dolphins to take out our ships, and Pete Hegseth commented on that.
And I can't confirm or deny whether we have kamikaze dolphins, but I can confirm they don't, ultimately.
There actually is a killer dolphin program that it's been in development, various stages of development for years. The CIA has been pretty obsessed with this. I'm actually going to be doing something on Baseless Conspiracies about it in the near future. So if you want to hear more about that, you can tune in Mondays at 10:30 on Badlands. Oh, we have a Canadian patriot in the chat. Zach, you've been following you for 3 years from Canada. Well, in that case, I'm going to pull my Canada story up a little bit sooner than I was planning on doing it. But if you are a patriot resident of Alberta, you might be in luck, because we've talked about their separatist movement on a number of occasions before. There was a petition that was circulating through Alberta, and it needed to reach a certain threshold. And now it has reached over 300,000 signatures. And so the separatist movement in Alberta is calling on the Premier of Alberta to trigger a referendum. Now, Alberta is one of the most, if not the most, oil-rich province in the state of Canada. And if they leave, the nation of Canada, and if they leave the nation of Canada, well, that's going to put Canada at a tremendous disadvantage. Now, certain people have suggested that Alberta become the 51st state. I don't think that's necessary. I think that they have enough industry and economy where they can be their own nation. They don't need to be part of the United States. But yesterday, the separatists in Alberta announced that they have formally submitted these almost 302,000 signatures so that they can try to trigger an October referendum, and the province could then leave Canada. The group needed only 178,000 signatures to force that province to consider such a vote, and the question of separation could go on a province-wide ballot as early as October. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said she would move forward if enough names were gathered and verified. And Smith has now said she personally does not support the oil-rich province leaving Canada, but she really has no choice if that's what the will of the people is actually. Soon to be the Republic of Alberta. Yes, I love that. So yes, I am fully in favor of the separatist movement in Alberta. We have a lot of good people up there, and they do not like the way that they are governed by the government of, is it Ontario or is it Montreal? Where is the capital of Canada? Anyways, right here from Rise of Alberta, Mitch Sylvester has announced the collection of nearly 302,000 signatures for that independence petition, and he called on the premier to recognize this as a clear expression of the democratic will of Albertans so they can move forward with putting this question on the ballot October 19th, 2026. Okay, going to go ahead and play the video.
Receiving this clear expression of the democratic will of Albertans and advancing the next steps to include this important question on the referendum ballot on October 19th, 2026. Respectfully, Mitch Sylvester. So the updated number now is 301,620, not counting our 1,500 more that are lost. So, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of you.
So, yeah, this is great news. And people over on both YouTube and, well, on all platforms have let me know that Ottawa is the capital of Canada. So, how many citizens live in Alberta, Canada? Let's see. They have about 5 million people. Okay. And the population grew by over 180,000 in a single year. Over half of the residents live in Calgary and Edmonton metropolitan areas. So I don't know what would be required if they put this on the ballot. How many people would need to vote out of, the number of registered voters there? I don't exactly know how that works in Alberta, but if this is possible to do, I think it would be a great move for them. So congratulations to the separatist movement. Now, I know you thought we were done talking about Eric Swalwell, but Eric Swalwell is the gift who just keeps on giving. The man is no longer in Congress anymore, but it continues to get worse for this man. He was recently forced to resign for a number of reasons, but primarily among them, it turned out he was a secret scumbag, perhaps not so secret. Many of us were aware of the scumbaggery taking place in Eric Swalwell's office, but he has had accusations of rape. Now he has an accusation of sending lewd videos of himself in an act of pleasuring himself to various women on the internet. It is a positively stunning development to think about getting a text message on your phone, Representative Eric Swalwell. You open it, and it's a video of Eric Swalwell choking the chicken. Can you imagine what that would be like? The poor women who received those videos. Just a few months ago, Eric Swalwell had hopes of being the governor of California. Now Eric Swalwell has hopes of maybe being the prison librarian. Now, this video of Eric Swalwell masturbating, along with a series of other perverted messages, were sent after he joined Snapchat to restore faith in democracy. Now, former Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell is accused of multiple women of sending these exact same sexual messages, which include that video of him allegedly masturbating. This is after he became one of the first members of Congress in history to join Snapchat. First thing he did was send a video of his dick. Oh, my God. Oh, and of course, it's only less than a month after Eric Swalwell resigned from Congress after being accused of rape by dozens of women. Oh, my goodness. I cannot believe what a dunce this guy is. All right. Now, in this report, which was released on Sunday, CNN spoke to more than a dozen women who claimed that he made these advances over the course of the last decade, including these sexually explicit messages on Snapchat. We can restore a lot of faith that people have in democracy by opening up a little bit more, Eric Swalwell told The Hill in 2016. He promptly went to his office and pulled his pants down to send a snap of his naked penis. Now, allegedly, he is also still communicating with some of these former interns on social media. Still, I guess, trying to get a little bit of action, trying to get people to pipe down and stop talking about the accusations of rape and inappropriate behavior. My goodness, let's take a listen.
The New York Times wrote about Eric Swalwell. We know he's a disgraced congressman, not in your party, other party, but same state. They said this, that Mr. Swalwell is still to this day using Snapchat as recently as this week. Swalwell communicated directly with a former intern on the app and asked her why she took a screenshot of his chat history. Why is he still messaging interns on Snapchat?
Because he's sick in the head and he's arrogant. This is what these politicians become. They go to Washington, they get in that culture, and they think the law doesn't apply to them, and that they can act boorishly and break the rules and treat people with utter disrespect. That's the epitome of the Washington do as I say, not as I do culture. But the reality is also that the Democrat Party protected him. Don't tell me that senior Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Xavier Becerra and others didn't know about his bad behavior. They knew damn well. They knew Katie Porter was disrespecting her staff, but they protect their own as long as they are useful. When Democrats got worried that they were going to get locked out of the governor's race in this primary, they decided Swalwell and Katie Porter were no longer useful to them, and that's why they released the damn.
So, yes, they eat their own. That is merely the beginning of it. Now, we are going to talk a little bit more about California, but I have to get to the big news. Now, Senator Rand Paul and a lot of people in the audience are worried that Anthony Fauci is not going to be prosecuted because of this perceived time limit that we have. Because if Anthony Fauci is looking to be brought up on charges on specific things, well, then there may be a statute of limitations. Rand Paul said on X, the DOJ has 1 week left to charge Anthony Fauci for the worst cover-up in modern medical history. He lied to Congress about funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan. Millions died. Trillions were spent. Fauci walked away with book deals and fawning media coverage instead of handcuffs. I re-upped my criminal referral to the DOJ because the evidence is overwhelming and justice has long enough been delayed. Now, I'm sure everybody here remembers because we've talked about the many lies of Anthony Fauci. In 2021, he and Rand Paul went head-to-head during Senate hearings. Fauci looked the American people and those senators in the eye, and he denied the NIH had funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. We know that to be a lie. Dr. Fauci, as you are aware, it is a crime to lie to Congress. Section 1001 of the U.S. Criminal Code. Critics say a felony and a 5-year penalty for lying to Congress, Rand Paul said back then in 2001. Now, of course, if Dr. Anthony Fauci was accused of committing individual crimes that would, say just lying to Congress, then he would not be able to be charged after that statute of limitations ran out. That is on top of Biden's auto pen pardon, giving Anthony Fauci a 10-year block of immunity. So theoretically, anything that he could be charged with in that time, he would be free from criminal prosecution. However, I have said this before, but if Dr. Anthony Fauci's crimes were related to a much larger series of crimes, such as the Rico Grande investigation down here in Florida, the ongoing grand conspiracy to destroy the administration of President Trump, well, then, of course, there would be no statute of limitations. And any suggestion there may be would be directly related to the last act in the ongoing of the furtherance of that criminal conspiracy. But the first thing that has to be taken into account is determining whether or not the Justice Department can make the case for Anthony Fauci's pardon to be null and void because it was not actually signed by Joe Biden. I would submit to you that Dr. Anthony Fauci will be indicted, and it will be despite the fact that he was pardoned, and it will be despite the fact that any perceived statute of limitations may be elapsing. I think this is part of the Rico Grande investigation that is currently going on. And what do I see? Last week, we had the indictment of one of Dr. Anthony Fauci's top lieutenants. One of the crimes that that man committed was the destruction of evidence and the attempt to cover up the fact that they knew exactly what they were doing. And in the communications over email, where they talk about deleting those emails and using a non-governmental approved means of communication, it's clear that they were aware that they were doing gain-of-funding research. Peter Daszak, I expect to be criminally indicted in the very near future. But now another of Dr. Anthony Fauci's top lieutenants, this time the NIH's Vincent Muster, is now under criminal investigation as well. And this takes it back just a little bit further. What was it that coronavirus was alleged to have come from? It was allegedly a bat coronavirus that had jumped from animals to humans. But it's clear that this bat coronavirus was manipulated. It was genetically engineered through gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology under the watchful eye and scientific input of Dr. Peter Daszak. Now, our last indictment lied about those things being known within the NIAID and NIH and Dr. Fauci's part to play in it. But Vincent Muster was Anthony Fauci's top bat coronavirus researcher. He was working at the high-security Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Hamilton, Montana. He and a colleague were caught smuggling dangerous bat pathogen samples. Now, the samples Muster and his colleagues were caught included a monkeypox virus from the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you'll remember, during Joe Biden's time in office, there was a monkeypox epidemic. You had gay men in hotspots like New York and San Francisco getting the monkeypox virus because they were suddenly getting very dangerous versions of monkeypox. Now, according to an explosive report released by Paul Thacker earlier this year, Munster and NIH lab scientist Claude Pkwy Yinda were stopped during airport security screening during a trip from Africa earlier this year. Thacker's report comes a day after White Coast Waste first posted on X that Munster had been removed from his HHS employee directory and was reportedly suspended. Now, according to the report, authorities discovered a hard shell protective case in their luggage containing undeclared human pathogen samples that were collected from patients. This was an illegal action, smuggling these dangerous pathogens in through regular airport security. I mean, if they would have gone into his bag and then been thrown by a luggage hauler at Spirit Airlines, that could have been released. And this particular version of the monkeypox virus could have ended up going out into the public and then would have started some perhaps far more dangerous outbreak. Now, you can see here in the original report from Paul Thacker discussing this particular virologist and the dangerous things that he was just caught doing. Now, according to that report, authorities discovered this dangerous pathogen among others. Neither of the scientists has confirmed whether these samples were properly inactivated. Probably not. But HHS has referred all questions about this case to the FBI, which is now actively investigating. We are unable to comment as this is an ongoing investigation, HHS spokesperson Andrew Nixon wrote in an email to Thacker, so we will refer you to the FBI. Thacker reports that when he contacted the FBI about this investigation into Munster and his NIH researcher, the FBI press office replied merely with, "We decline to comment." Now, sure y'all remember, shortly after the original COVID virus began being detected around America and the world, Columbia University virologist Vincent Rasinello sent Munster an alarming email in February of 2020, saying that he had heard about the new COVID virus, that it had a furin cleavage site that might have been engineered. We know that engineering now was done by the insertion of material from HIV. He said in his email to Munster, if true, this is very bad for all of virology research. And what was Munster's reply? And the fun begins. That is a very odd reply to make to the possibility of a human-engineered virus being discovered out in the wild, not having any knowledge about exactly what would happen. But both Munster and Yinda are now in administrative leave. Their contact information is no longer in the HHS employee directory, and repeated calls and emails to Munster for comment regarding a source who stated he had been placed on leave has not been returned. Lacey Williams of NIH referred us to an HHS form to request a comment, but no reply has been given by HHS either. The investigation of this foreign-born Munster comes just weeks after White Coat Waste unveiled billboards right near his high-security biolab, calling out the NIH's continued Fauci-era funding for experiments on primates and bats, which still to this day echo the risky gain-of-function research that gave rise to the COVID-19 pandemic, which, if you believe it to have been an extension of the grand conspiracy, there was nothing accidental about it, and its release into the wild was done intentionally to hamper the progress being made by President Trump's first administration. Now, you can see these billboards right here. They're part of White Coat Waste's National Tax Week ad campaign, spotlighting the NIH's continued funding of dangerous animal experiments at Munster's lab at Rocky Mountain under President Trump's current administration. Now, they also highlight tests involving Munster that infected primates and bats with deadly viruses like Ebola, Nipah, and a variety of coronaviruses, often without pain relief, which caused severe suffering and ultimately death of the animals that they gave them to. Vincent Munster was part of Peter Daszak's Defuse group. Defuse is the blueprint for making COVID in a lab. The idea was rejected for funding by U.S. authorities as too reckless and dangerous, but on the Chinese side, they went ahead and did it. Of course, Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance, developing this technology and unable to do it here in the United States, was funded by Anthony Fauci at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Vincent Munster was part of that. How much closer do you need to get to Anthony Fauci to be part of the grand conspiracy? With these now 2 likely criminal indictments directly at Anthony Fauci's doorstep, I ask the same question I asked about James Comey or any of the other people who are within 1 foot away from Barack Hussein Obama. Are they willing to spend the rest of their lives in prison simply to protect a monster like Dr. Anthony Fauci? I think ultimately the answer will be no. And at least one of these people is going to come out singing about what Anthony Fauci knew, what he was directing people to do, exactly how large of a role he played, and what crimes he may have committed. That other individual I keep mentioning is Dr. David Morens. Again, he was Fauci's longtime senior advisor at NIAID, and his multiple felony counts for allegedly using that personal Gmail account so they could conceal official communications, emails evading the Freedom of Information Act requests they knew were sure to come after all of this shit hit the proverbial fan. They knew that they were going to ask questions about the grant funding for the EcoHealth Alliance work that was being done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They knew that Peter Daszak was doing gain-of-function research. And yes, Anthony Fauci lied about it because, of course, you can't do that sort of thing. Munster also played a central role in helping EcoHealth Alliance secure that money from the NIAID, and Fauci funded that controversial Wuhan West Bat Lab project, which was also being done at the Colorado State University. In 2016, he also co-wrote the proposal for the Colorado State University bat colony, stating, Dr. Munster will facilitate the establishment of the colony and will be the laboratory lead and co-investigator on all experimental studies utilizing these bats. We will have the support and use of the BSL-4 laboratory and veterinary personnel at RML for experimental work utilizing bats. Again, how many degrees of separation do you need to be part of the ongoing criminal conspiracy? Here, virologist Vincent Muster wrote privately that EcoHealth's claim that pandemic-capable viruses are everywhere is just not correct, and their research framework typically never results in vaccines or drugs. He said a taxpayer may be quite upset to discover that EcoHealth Alliance took millions of USAID dollars fed into Chinese batwork on the premise of preventing spillover, and then realizing that nothing of what they claimed was actually achieved. Anthony Fauci's minions in David Morin's and Vincent Muster were fully aware of just how deep this grift went and that the work these people were doing was highly dangerous. In 2020, Munster sent a letter to NIAID explicitly encouraging that agency to fund his project. This mad scientist was also the main author of the 2018 NIH experiment, also exposed by White Coat Waste, which infected bats that were purchased from a Maryland zoo with a Chinese bat coronavirus strain that was cloned from a virus collected by the Wuhan Institute of Virology and Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance. Now, Munster also helped organize a bat virus conference alongside EcoHealth Alliance and the infamous Batwoman Shi Zhengali of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I am expecting Vincent Muster to be indicted for his role in smuggling these dangerous pathogens into the United States, but I also expect him to be indicted for his activity and behavior that we've outlined right here. Once these people surrounding Anthony Fauci are all indicted and Anthony Fauci's pardon is null and void, I'm certain that work is going on in the background right now, then Anthony Fauci can be indicted for anything related to this grand conspiracy right here. At the Rocky Mountain Lab, Munster has conducted Ebola experiments on primates, including animals that are sourced from Fauci's notorious Monkey Island facility. In 2023, White Coat Waste teamed up with then Representative Matt Rosendale from Montana, who wanted to slash Munster's salary to $1 as part of an amendment to the labor HHS appropriations bills. That amendment read, reduces the salary of Vincent Muster, Chief Virus Ecology Section at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, to $1. Now, that failed, but I thought it was a valiant effort. The president and the founder of White Coat Waste, Anthony Bellotti, said in a statement, for years, WCW investigations have exposed how Vincent Muster's reckless Fauci-funded animal experiments with Chinese coronaviruses, Ebola, and other foreign bioagents threaten public health and national security. Munster was even part of the original proposal to engineer COVID-like viruses at the Wuhan lab, where White Coat Waste first uncovered and ended Fauci's gain-of-function animal tests that almost certainly prompted the pandemic. White Coat Waste has led efforts to shut Munster's maximum pain animal labs down, and we are now calling on their continued funding with our WTF RFK billboards right near that lab in Montana. Munster's wasteful and dangerous animal experiments are a recipe for disaster, and if he is suspended, as our sources suggest, finally held accountable, taxpayers and animals should celebrate. With Munster on leave and under investigation and White Coat Waste keeping the pressure up through public billboards, the days of unchecked Fauci-era experiments at facilities like Rocky Mountain Lab may finally be numbered. So, again, I believe this to be happening right now. And much like the investigations into James Comey, this is not something that is simply going to just get done overnight. The arguments to be made regarding the pardon for Anthony Fauci and many others in the Biden administration, this will be a legal argument that's never been attempted. And in order to make sure that it stays upheld in court, of course, they're going to have some very, very complicated legal arguments to make, probably bringing a lot of evidence. In order to make that case, it's going to be the kind of thing that we want to stick, because if they shoot for the moon and they miss, then Anthony Fauci and anybody else who got these blanket pardons using the auto pen, they're going to get away with it. the same rationale to declare Anthony Fauci's pardon invalid, null and void, will then also apply to Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. So there is far more riding on its success than simply making sure Anthony Fauci gets indicted. There's a lot that we need to think about when it comes to this. All right, you guys, before we go through the final thank yous, I do have one more final message, and it is from a longtime viewer of the program, the good people at Sea of Mud. You guys, this country wasn't just handed to us. We carved it out one hard mile at a time from 1776 until right now. That is 250 years of grit, sacrifice, men and women who refuse to fold under pressure. And Sea of Mud Apparel has just dropped their 250-year anniversary shirt. It's built to honor where each and every one of us came from, and more importantly, the fight that it took to get here. Every piece is American-sourced and manufactured in the United States of America, Nashville, Tennessee. There's no shortcuts. There's no overseas mass production, just real gear for real Americans. It's not some soft, throwaway patriotic tee. It's rugged, it's durable, and it means something when you wear it. And right now, sale items are all buy one, get one free. So if you believe this country is still worth standing up for, then this one's for you. And to get it, you just go to seaofmud.com, SEAOFMUD.com. That is seaofmud.com. When you use the code RUMBLE, you're actually also going to get 10% off, and you can take care of that BOGO deal when you head on over to the sales section. Sea of Mud Apparel, 250 years later, and we're not done yet. You guys can also use the QR code you see on screen or the link that you're going to see below the video. Thank you again also to Sea of Mud for supporting the show and for being a viewer of the program as well. All right, so I need to say thank you to Filter Dog, the after show. Oh, yes, we are going to be sending you over to Brad and Abby for the raid. Thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to Trisha, who says, speaking of Strait of Hormuz, let's pull this up real quick. Is this an Instagram? Oh. I can't get the audio to play.
State, big mistake. Playing with the drones gonna seal your fate. You got threats.
This is good. This is from Sith Daddy. I'm going to go ahead and pass this out because I want to get you guys over to Brad and Abby, and I've got to eat dinner. So thank you very much for that. I had a couple of other funny AI videos that I was going to play for you, but we'll do that tomorrow when we start out. Thank you, Trisha, for that. Here comes the link over on the other platforms as well. You can also follow Sith Daddy on YouTube and X as well. That's where I follow him. I don't really go on Instagram. But over here on YouTube, cool. All right, you guys, the name is Sith Daddy, as in Revenge of the Sith, Sith Daddy. So you can follow him on all relevant platforms. He does hilarious Star Wars themed AI videos that are pretty amazing. All right, so thank you very much to Trisha. Thank you very much to everybody for supporting the program. I'm going to send you guys over to Brad and Abby. That'll be over on Pilled and on Rumble. And let me just, I think I might have something over here on Cash App. Maybe not. Angela. No, Angela, I already said thank you to Angela. Okay, cool. In that case, we are done. I'm going to go eat dinner. Good luck. God bless. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 5 p.m. right here on Red Pill News Live. Until then, peace.